There's a man screaming in the next room. Your hand hovers over a switch connected to an ominous electrical box. A man in a lab coat stands behind you, his voice calm but commanding. "Please continue," he says. You flinch at the sound of another agonized cry through the wall. The stranger in the other room answered a question incorrectly, and your job is to punish him with an electric shock. Your heart pounds. This feels so wrong. You turn to the authority figure and mumble that you don't think you can go on. His eyes narrow. In a stern voice, he insists. The experiment requires that you continue. You swallow hard. The dial in front of you is now in the red zone labeled Danger, Severe Shock. The man behind you adds, "You have no other choice. You must go on." Sweat drips down your temple. The man in the other room screams, "Let me out! I won't do this anymore." Every instinct in you begs to stop, and yet, your finger, almost moving on its own, presses the switch one more time. A jolt, a scream. In that moment, you are horrified at what you've done. How did you get here, hurting an innocent stranger just because someone told you to? This scenario sounds like a nightmare, but it really happened in a psychology experiment in the early 1960s. This was the setup of Stanley Milgram's infamous obedience experiment. Milgram, a psychologist at Yale, wanted to see how far people would go in obeying an authority figure, even when it meant harming someone. In his lab, volunteers were told to administer electric shocks to a person whenever that person answered a question wrong. The shocks were fake, and the victim's screams were acted. But the volunteers didn't know that. To them, it was all horribly real. The results were shocking in more ways than one. Before the experiment, experts predicted that almost no one would go to the maximum voltage. They were wrong. In the actual experiment, about 2/3 of participants, ordinary men and women, kept delivering shocks all the way to what they thought was a lethal level. Even as the person in the other room screamed, begged, and then fell ominously silent, most people continued to press the buttons because the authority figure calmly told them to. These weren't evil people. Many trembled, hesitated, even protested. Some laughed nervously or bit their lips in anguish. But when the man in the lab coat said, "It is absolutely essential that you continue," they obeyed. They felt they had no choice. They were just following orders. The pressure to obey outweighed the voice of their conscience. Milgram himself was stunned. Ordinary people, simply following instructions, were willing to inflict what they believed was excruciating pain on a fellow human being. What does this reveal about human nature? It's unsettling. We have a deep inclination to obey authority, even when it violates our morals. Under the right conditions, the kindest person can act cruelly, not out of malice, but out of obedience. The situation can overpower our individual sense of right and wrong. This isn't just a quirk of a lab experiment. It echoes something tragic from history. To understand, step out of the lab and into a courtroom, a decade earlier. It's 1961, Jerusalem. A man named Adolf Eichmann is on trial for war crimes. Eichmann had been a high-ranking Nazi official, responsible for organizing the deportation of millions of Jews to concentration camps during the Holocaust. The world expected a monster at the defendant's stand, a fanatical, hate-filled villain. Instead, they saw a bland, middle-aged bureaucrat looking like an ordinary accountant. He insisted he was no fanatic, no psychopath. He was, in his words, just following orders. Watching this trial was the philosopher Hannah Arendt. What she observed in Eichmann was chilling precisely because it was so ordinary. He wasn't a cartoon villain. He was terrifyingly normal. In her report on the trial, Arendt coined the phrase, "the banality of evil." By that, she meant that great evils are often committed not by sadistic monsters, but by ordinary people who don't think for themselves and simply obey. Eichmann helped carry out one of history's worst atrocities as if it were just another day at the office, checking boxes, scheduling trains, driven not by personal rage, but by obedience and ambition. He performed evil deeds without evil intentions, almost without thinking at all. In short, the deeds were monstrous, but the doer was ordinary. Eichmann had surrendered his ability to think for himself. He just followed orders, filled out forms, sent trainloads of human beings to their doom, then went home as if he had merely shipped cargo. This is the frightening truth. Unspeakable crimes can grow out of routine obedience. Milgram's experiment echoes the same lesson. When the people in the lab said, "I had to do it," or "I was just following orders," they echoed the mindset that Eichmann and countless others used to justify horrific acts. They felt they weren't personally responsible because someone else above them was in charge. When we see ourselves as just an instrument of someone else's will, our conscience grows quiet. The voice in your head saying, "This is wrong," gets drowned out by the thought, "I'm just doing what I'm told." All of this points to a sobering truth. Obedience can become a trap. In that trap, moral responsibility is passed up the chain of command until no one feels accountable. Ordinary people can commit extraordinarily harmful acts just by doing their job or following the rules. Before we get too comfortable thinking, this only happens in labs or history books, look around us. This dynamic is everywhere in modern life, in quieter ways. Think about the workplace. Have you ever had a boss tell you to do something that felt wrong, but you did it because, well, they're the boss? Maybe you fudged a report, kept quiet about an error, or pushed a product you knew was faulty. In corporate scandals, it's rarely one villain. It's teams of regular employees telling themselves, "I have to do this. My supervisor said so." Fear of losing a job, or just the habit of following orders, can turn good people into participants in harm. Consider bureaucracies. A low-level official might enforce a cruel policy, say, deny someone critical help or separate a family, and justify it with, "I'm just following the rules." The system says do it, so they do it, even if it hurts their conscience. A clerk stamps the form that ruins a life, then shrugs because it's policy. The human cost is buried under routine. Think about the online world. Every day, swarms of ordinary people on the internet join virtual mobs to shame or attack someone. Perhaps a popular post declares, "This person is terrible, get them." And thousands of people pile on with insults or threats. Each person thinks everyone else is doing it, so it must be okay. Or they fear being targeted themselves if they speak up against it. In the anonymity of an online mob, personal responsibility evaporates. It's easy to say cruel things when you feel like just another face in the crowd, following the crowd's judgment. Even among friends and family, the pressure to go along can silence our morals. How often have people laughed at a cruel joke they actually found hurtful, just to fit in? Or kept quiet when a family tradition or social norm felt wrong? We ignore that inner voice to avoid conflict, to avoid standing out. These are the everyday arenas where the cost of obedience quietly builds up, decision by decision. Now take a moment to reflect. Has there been a time in your life when you stayed silent or went along with something that you knew was wrong? Maybe you watched someone get blamed for something they didn't do, and you said nothing because it was your boss or a leader pointing the finger. Maybe you saw a classmate or a colleague being bullied, and you didn't step in because you didn't want to become a target yourself. Or perhaps you agreed to follow a procedure at work that made you uneasy because everyone else around you insisted it was just how things are done. We often push these memories aside, but we still feel the sting of our own cowardice. We remember that twist in our gut, thinking, "I should have done something." You're not alone. Nearly everyone, at some point, betrays their own conscience in a small way out of fear or conformity. We're social creatures, taught to cooperate and follow the lead of authority. That same inclination can lead us into moral disaster if we're not careful. The cost of blind obedience is that we give up a bit of our integrity each time, trading away our freedom of choice and our sense of right and wrong. Yet there is another side to this story, a hopeful side. Just as ordinary people can slip into evil through obedience, ordinary people are also capable of incredible courage through defiance. In Milgram's experiment, a few participants did refuse to continue, despite the scientists' stern orders. In corrupt companies, some brave employees blow the whistle instead of going along with wrongdoing. Under oppressive regimes, some officials and citizens have even risked their lives to defy immoral laws and save others, as a few brave souls did in Nazi-occupied Europe, hiding people in danger at great personal risk. These examples shine a light in the darkness. They show that we can choose to listen to our conscience over the commands of authority. Moral courage is not loud or flashy. Often, it's a lonely whisper in the dark. It's the employee who tells the boss, "I'm sorry, I can't do that." It's the one person in the meeting who voices, "Is this right?" when everyone else is silent. It's the stranger who steps in when they see someone being harassed, even when it would be easier to walk away. Moral courage is the antidote to the banality of evil. It's the willingness to stand up for what's right, even when it costs us. We all have this capacity. Yes, even you. The same person who might have felt pressured to administer shocks in Milgram's lab can, in a different moment, choose to refuse. It might feel like a small choice to say, "No, I won't do this," but that small choice can mean everything. The more you exercise that moral courage, the stronger it becomes. So the next time you face that tense, uneasy moment, remember that you do have a choice, and you can choose to do the right thing. Blind obedience can cost lives, fuel atrocities, and erode our character. It can make good people do bad things. But there's another side of the ledger, the cost of courage. Doing the right thing can be hard. It might cost you comfort, popularity, or even safety. But in the long run, the price of courage is much smaller than the price of compliance. Losing a job or facing criticism for standing up is nothing compared to losing your soul by going along with something you know is wrong. So what can we do? Start by listening to that inner voice and encouraging others to do the same. Don't silence that whisper of doubt when something feels off. Question orders or norms that strike you as wrong. Make it clear that just following orders is not a moral excuse, and help create a culture where questioning authority in the name of what's right is seen as a virtue, not a vice. Ultimately, true moral strength lies in knowing when to say no. Authority's roar can be loud, intimidating, and overwhelming. But inside each of us, there's a voice that often speaks in a whisper. Don't mistake the volume of a command for the justice of it. A million people can shout that something wrong is right, and it's still wrong. Your lone voice can speak the truth, even if it's quiet. Remember, the power of conscience is one of the greatest powers we have. It's what separates someone who just follows orders from someone who truly thinks and feels for themselves and others. The next time you find yourself in an emotionally conflicted moment, when your heart is telling you something's not right, even as an authority figure or a crowd is telling you to just go along, stop for a second. Listen to that whisper within. That's your moral compass, your humanity, trying to be heard. Have the courage to listen to your conscience, even when it whispers against the roar of authority. In that act of listening, and in the choice that follows, you affirm your humanity. You show that you are not just an instrument of someone else's will, but an individual with the freedom to choose right from wrong. In a world where so much harm is done by people who claim they had no choice, your choice to do what's right can be a beacon to others. The cost of obedience is high, but the reward of courage is priceless. Dare to pay that price. Dare to stand up when it counts. Because when enough people do, the world changes. It becomes a place where no one can easily say, "I was just following orders," to excuse injustice. Instead, more people will be able to say, "I listened to my conscience."